In this podcast episode, historian Barry Strauss explores the ancient history of Judea, highlighting its complex political, religious, and social dynamics from the late Bronze Age through Roman times. The conversation touches on Jewish indigeneity in the land of Israel, the rise and reign of Herod the Great, and the violent revolts against Roman rule that culminated in the destruction of Jerusalem and the Second Temple. Strauss also discusses the broader context of Jewish relations with empires like the Parthians, the emergence of early Christianity, and the lasting implications of these historical events on modern conflicts and identities in the region. Barry Strauss outlines the earliest known references to Israel and the Jewish people from Egyptian inscriptions circa 1210 BCE through various ancient Near Eastern sources, including Assyrian records and the Moabite stone from the 9th century BCE, which mention the House of David. Archaeological and epigraphic evidence confirms a long-standing Jewish presence in the land known historically as Israel or Judea, with a well-established religious and cultural tradition by the early 6th century BCE. After the Babylonian exile and Persian liberation by Cyrus the Great in 539 BCE, Jewish communities re-established themselves in Jerusalem and the wider province, thriving alongside a growing diaspora throughout the Eastern Roman and Parthian empires. The territory of ancient Judea under Roman influence roughly corresponds to much of modern Israel, the West Bank, parts of Syria, Lebanon, and western Jordan. Throughout its history, this region witnessed shifting control between empires, from Neo-Babylonian to Persian, Hellenistic, Greek, and eventually Roman dominion following Pompey's conquest in 63 BCE. Judea was intermittently independent, especially during the Hasmonean, Maccabean revolt in the 2nd century BCE, when the Jewish state briefly regained autonomy before internal strife and external pressures led its leaders to solicit Roman intervention, ultimately resulting in client rulership. The Maccabean revolt began in 67 BCE against the Hellenistic Seleucid Empire's religious oppression, marking a pivotal moment in Jewish self-governance. By 140 BCE, an autonomous Jewish state was established, expanding its territory and instituting the Torah as law. The Hasmonean dynasty integrated converts into Judaism and consolidated control over a broader region. However, internal divisions between rival claimants to the throne weakened the state, prompting appeals to Rome for arbitration. Pompey's siege of Jerusalem and subsequent reduction of the kingdom to a tetrarchy symbolized the end of this independence and the beginning of sustained Roman control. Herod the Great's rise to power in 37 BCE as king of Judea represents a complex interplay of ambition, political astuteness, and brutality. Though of mixed Idumean, converted Jews, and Arab descent, Herod positioned himself as a loyal client king to Rome, winning favor with Augustus and reshaping Judea's landscape to strengthen Roman influence while attempting to legitimize his authority among the Jews. He rebuilt the Second Temple into an architectural marvel, creating what is now known partially as the Western Wall. Yet Herod also commissioned pagan temples honoring the Roman Emperor Augustus, which caused outrage among devout Jews. His reign was marked by harsh repression, internal purges, including the executions of his own family members, and actions that alienated religious and ethnic groups within the realm. This dual legacy, as both a prosperous builder and feared despot, underlines the challenges of governance in a politically and religiously fragmented region. The Jerusalem Temple was the spiritual heart of Jewish life, functioning as the singular sacred site where God's presence was believed to dwell. It was the focal point for pilgrimage festivals such as Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, where Jews from across the diaspora offered sacrifices based on their means. The temple's destruction by the Romans in 70 CE was catastrophic, not only physically, but also spiritually and culturally, cutting off traditional religious practices. For Jews, the temple was tied to national identity and divine favor, making its loss a profound trauma echoed throughout centuries of diaspora and contention over access to the site. Judea was ethnically and culturally diverse during this period. Greek-speaking populations, Samaritans with their own temple and differing religious traditions, Idumeans and other groups coexisted alongside Jews, often with mutual suspicion and hostility. Many non-Jews in urban centers were Hellenized, while Jews themselves were divided religiously and politically into factions such as the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, Zealots, and others. Religious sectarianism, differing attitudes toward Roman rule, and ethnic fractionalization contributed to an unstable environment, complicating governance and fueling internal conflicts that often erupted into violence. The Roman Empire's general policy was one of pragmatic tolerance towards diverse religious customs, including Judaism's monotheistic tradition, which was unique in the ancient world. Romans were mostly indifferent to religious beliefs, so long as these did not translate into political rebellion. Jews were distinct in that they were exempt from emperor worship, a privilege reciprocated by Herod's ritual sacrifices on behalf of Augustus in the temple. However, episodes such as Caligula's proposed statue in the temple and official Roman insults to Jewish beliefs exacerbated tensions. Religious identity, intertwined with political resistance, made Judea a major hotspot for conflict within the empire. Following Herod's death in 4 BCE, Judea's governance faltered under his successors and eventually became a Roman province by 6 CE. Increasing Roman impositions, economic burdens, and religious provocations led to periodic Jewish uprisings, culminating in the Great Jewish Revolt beginning in 66 CE. This revolt featured internal divisions and brutal factional fighting among Jews themselves, diminishing their capacity to resist Rome. Vespasian was tasked with suppressing the rebellion, first conquering Galilee and other areas, and then besieging Jerusalem in 70 CE. The Romans ultimately destroyed the city and the temple, leaving the area devastated. A final Jewish stronghold at Masada fell in 73 or 74 CE after a mass suicide pact rather than surrender. Jesus of Nazareth emerged during this volatile period, preaching spiritual redemption amid widespread expectations of an apocalyptic kingdom of God and restoration of Davidic rule. Unlike other Messianic figures, Jesus advocated spiritual resistance rather than armed revolt. His crucifixion under Roman governor Pontius Pilate during Passover highlighted the tense relationship between Jewish authorities, nationalist zealots, and Roman occupiers. His followers grappled with his death and resurrection, founding what would become Christianity, a sect initially seen as Jewish, but gradually distinct. The period was marked by fermenting religious ideas and competing claims about messiahship and redemption. Jews had sizable diasporic communities beyond Judea, especially in the Parthian, later Sasanian Empire, where they often enjoyed favorable conditions. This diaspora became a critical geopolitical factor as disaffected Judean factions sought Parthian aid against Rome. Parthia was Rome's chief rival in the east, and periodic Jewish revolts benefited from Persian support or incitement, intensifying Roman insecurity and reprisals. The interconnectedness between Judean and diaspora Jews and the competing imperial allegiances complicate any simplistic narrative of Roman-Jewish relations and continue to resonate in modern regional politics. Rome's punitive measures after crushing the revolts included mass executions, slavery, destruction of temples, and the imposition of the Jewish tax, fiscus Judaicus, payable to Jupiter, which further humiliated Jews throughout the empire and seeded future insurrections. The Bar Kokhba revolt in the 130 CE was the last major large-scale rebellion, suppressed with enormous difficulty. Subsequently, the region was renamed Palestine and remained under external control for centuries, passing through Byzantine, Persian, Arab, Ottoman, and other rulers until the establishment of the modern state of Israel in 994-8. The historical persistence of Jewish presence, religious tradition, and political resilience underpin modern claims to indigeneity and influence ongoing disputes in the region. Strauss emphasizes that Jews are indigenous to the land and have maintained a continuous, though fluctuating, presence for millennia. The recurring theme of Jewish disunity historically cautions against internal divisions, weakening national cohesion. The region's geopolitical centrality demands vigilance and astute diplomacy, balancing relationships with Western allies as well as neighboring Arab, Iranian, and Turkish powers. Religion, while deeply meaningful, can both unify and inflame conflict, as seen then and now. Understanding historical complexities and recognizing shared human and political challenges can inform contemporary dialogues about peace and coexistence.